What's
Okay,
up,
now I can.
everybody? You are in tune to Marvelous Talk with your main man, Damon,
What's cracking? What's cracking? True believers.
and your boy, Big Sean, Big G.
What's happening?
Man, we have another exciting episode of WandaVision to dive into. But before we do, I always got to tell you, if you have not watched, please stop right here because there's going to be a whole bunch of spoilers inside of this talk. And also, if you're new to the channel, please hit that like and subscribe button. You know, show us some love. You know, leave us some feedback. You know, talk to us. Tell us what you think. But definitely, we're going to jump into this week's episode. My goodness. If I'm telling you, the pictures that are being painted and the things that are being told throughout this week's episode are tying into everything that we see in the MCU. And right now, my juices are flowing. Come on, D. Tell us about it, man. Talk to us.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is I'd like to start with the beginning of this episode and kind of give you a breakdown of what happened. So our intro this particular week, as you know, we've been skipping decades. You know, Wanda loves sitcoms. And so we're starting with this particular episode. Looks like we're in the 80s, kind of maybe moving into the maybe 90s, I would say. Definitely more 90s. And the theme, definitely, it looks like they straight up took Malcolm in the Middle and just like wrote new lyrics over the top of it. And there's just a funny scenario, you know, just talking about, you know, we're not going to stop the chaos. We're going to keep it going. So what they're saying is really funny. It was just a great little intro that they had, particularly for this week. And we start off amazingly doing almost kind of the same way those 90s sitcoms work. You know, Malcolm in the Middle, they were notorious for breaking the fourth wall. So you have Billy, you know, who's going to be a future Wiccan. He's breaking the fourth wall, talking about what's going on with their uncle that's now in the house. As you know, the big reveal last week was Pietro knocking on the door. So he's sleeping on the couch, and they're talking about how things have changed since he's come into the picture. And so basically what happens is you see Wanda come down, and she's got it's a Halloween version of the show that we're having. Halloween's going on, and she comes in with the actual Scarlet Witch attire that you see her in the comic books, and she talks about being a Sokovia, a fortune teller. And so then the next thing, you know, what's really interesting, Pietro brings up the fact that it reminds him of their times of, you know, trick-or-treating as kids. And they paint a picture of something that happened when they were trick-or-treating as kids, a lady giving them a fish. And Wanda says that she doesn't recall it the way he just described, which I thought was really interesting that she made that statement. But he says maybe it's because you've suppressed your memories, you know. So I thought that was really interesting. And guys, what were your thoughts on that when he said that? What came to your mind when that was brought up?
Well, one of the things that I picked up on or noticed is that the show has overall just talked about the perception, about who's actually seeing what and what perception the show's actually being seen in. And I'm constantly seeing that the perception of the show has changed from the viewpoint or vantage point, maybe from the ages of Sword, to maybe now how Wanda saw it, to then like how Monica recalled the blip of the snapper coming back, to now we have this character who Pietro, and we don't even know if it is Pietro, and we're seeing it or images from his viewpoint. So that's been an interesting factor where I've seen it bounce back and forth of viewpoints of who sees it and how they see it. Because he even calls on the fact of, or Wanda even calls on the fact of, well, that's not how I remember it. And she goes back and sees it, and it's just a little bit different or a little bit off than what he says. So it's like almost like a slight lie or a slight, it's the truth, but it's not, you know, which is real sinister.
Interesting. Ma, what's your thoughts on that?
The same thing, you know, he's equipped with an answer, but every time she asks him a question, he hits her back to kind of throw her off balance so that she won't go down that path. So it's kind of like, you know, he's kind of having a standoff with it, so he knows some information, but the information is not quite accurate, and I'm wrestling with the fact of at this point I'm totally convinced it's not Pietro. You know what I'm saying? I'm totally convinced.
I agree.
I'm just trying to figure out who it is at this point.
Okay, I'm gonna point something in y'all direction to think about. Could this be a pulling of Pietro that was done from an alternate reality? Since we know we're gonna have multiverse stuff going on, so could this have been her attempt in wanting him so bad that she pulled from a realm that she wasn't even aware of, and he came out of that Fox universe that we know Marvel acquired? They so slick with how they did it, but maybe, I mean, yet to be determined. But I really believe he's Pietro. I really do. Just from the way he interacted with her in this episode, and it's clearly there from two different mindsets, but kind of similar in some respects. But I just really felt that maybe this guy is from another reality and he got pulled into this one. So
I can see it. I can see it, but continue with the breakdown. We'll get into that.
Most definitely. So next thing that we see is the actual Vision comes down, and he's back in his comic book attire that you're familiar with seeing Vision dressed in. And interesting enough, he says that was the only outfit that he had in his closet.
Yeah, he didn't look happy about that. He
was
happy about it.
So Wanda, this is definitely her way of making the ball and chain around Vision. It's like, nah, brother, you ain't going nowhere. And so he brings up the fact that he's not going trick-or-treating with the family. He's going to, look for crime, quote unquote. And so she's like shocked by that. She's like, wait a minute, no, that's not what you're supposed to. And she didn't finish. Basically, they were about to go there, when you're about to go there with somebody, but you let it go. And interesting enough, Billy brings out how mom and dad, they're not really arguing. They just not on the same page lately when it comes to stuff. So we know that's just a continuation of what happened last week. So he leaves, goes out on his investigation of the potential crime that's in the area. But Vision has other ideas in mind. We know that. We know that he basically feels like he's enslaved, and he's wanting to know more about this Westview world that he lives in. And so Pietro and Wanda have some more conversations about, just what's going on in their house. And then he goes and gets himself a costume along with Tommy, and it's the actual Quicksilver from the comic, the costume that both of them have on. So they go out into the neighborhood, and all of a sudden, y'all, we finally see kids. There haven't been any kids around at all, but all of a sudden we see families, we see kids. And so the next part is Wanda begins to, have some more dialogue with Pietro about their, circumstance and situation that they're in. And then I'm going to turn it over to one of you guys to go ahead and talk about the next part of what happens.
Well, the next part was real interesting because we changed the vantage view from the actual like trick or treat that goes on to where we blip back to or view back to the actual sword or what's going on in Sword. Excuse me. And in Sword, we see that, excuse me, the antagonist who we think now possibly could be a villain who runs Sword and Monica have a confrontation between actually what goes on in their conversation. And within the context of the conversation, it goes from where it's like a monotone or like an underlying rivalry to where now they full blown are punching at each other. He takes on from an antagonistic standpoint to even ask Darcy and Agent Wu, like, do you guys work for me? Are you guys even here? And he said, oh, wow, well, we know now what type of conversation this is and what's going on with this. And then there's a reference point of what is Sword actually doing with the blip? What is actually going on? What's going on, or the hex, not the blip, the hex. What's going on inside the hex? And so I think for the first time, from a vantage point as a viewer, you get the idea that there's something being covered up. There's something that we just can't see or we don't know that's going on with that. And I think the director took a broad approach in that to say, basically, when the audience figures it out, then it's time for us to start revealing what's going on. So then you see the confrontation, and there's this fight that happens between the director and the three good people, which I call Darcy, Agent Wu, and Monica. And he's like, get them off my base, get them away from me, get them out of here, right? So they in turn make an internal decision, almost from a heroic standpoint, that we're going to come to save the day and we're going to do the right thing for the right reason. So they fight off the agents, and then you see them separate, and then you cut back to inside the hex, right? And inside the hex, you have an active trick or treat, an active Halloween, an active participation of just characters everywhere participating on, one probably, if not one of the most biggest holidays in the world, but also it touches base and touches line on, is this something sinister? Is this something evil? Is this a nightmare? What is actually going on? Because it's Halloween, right? You see the children walking through, and they're just, going through and, doing what normally kids would do. And I reiterate what Dane said. All of a sudden there's kids. We haven't had kids until this episode, right? And then from there, you see Wanda interact with one of the characters that we haven't seen in episodes, Herb, right? And Herb's dressed in a Frankenstein outfit and all, and there's this conversation that goes on between them two. Well, Herb is supposed to be part of this bigger, broader neighborhood watch that happens with inside the hex. And you see Herb pushing his head to the headset. Hey, what's going on? What? All the pumpkins are smashed. What? All the candy's gone. What? Wait a minute. I gotta go. And so all of a sudden, Monica looks confused and almost like borderline upset. And Herb's like, wait a minute. Is there something that I can do to make this? Is there something that needs to be reset? Is there something that needs to be redone? And it almost does a throwback or a callback to the prior episode where you had the interaction between Agnes and Wanda, where they was talking about if, do we need to redo the lines, or that's not what's supposed to be said. So it takes on a whole nother idea. Is this reality? Is this real? Is this, what is actually going on, right? And then from there, we start talking about the interaction between Pietro and the kids. It happened at the beginning, more or less, like where he spins all around them and scares them. But you really see Pietro pushing the kids almost to like, hey, you guys are like me. You guys can do what I can do. You guys got powers like I got, So you see where he's like, well, if we're going to do this, there's a need for speed, and they run around and he's got them running at super speed, and the kids act like it's just normal, almost like, like that they're actually enjoying it, right? But prior to that whole setting, there's a statement that's made. And the statement is where he says, go ahead, spawns of Satan, seeds of Satan, do what you do, and it's like he almost antagonized them.
Demon spawns, yep.
Yeah, he almost antagonized them to like be involved in some sinister act, and I think that really like gave a throwback or a drawback to me. Well, fellas, what that part was like the most culminating part of that section. So what do y'all think about that?
I mean, he's definitely influenced them. I mean, like you mentioned, when Herb was going to headset, him and Pietro and Tommy was the one that was doing all the chaos that Herb was talking about. So, but I'm glad you brought that up, Sean, because he did say that line about Satan spawns or whatever. I'm like, demon spawns. And I'm like, where does that come from? You know what I'm saying? But that is a clear nod, definitely from the comics, of them being shards of Mephisto. Yeah. So I just thought that was, I'm glad you brought that up, because I kind of glossed over it, but that was definitely said, and you can't just ignore it. It's definitely
you can. And I think on this episode, Dane, Big G, literally they've been, feeding us little bit by little bit. But I think they've kind of opened up the pantry and laid out some things and like, okay, I'm really doing what you think I'm doing, right? It's not, kind of like with the cute girl in the party. You don't know if she flirting with you or not. You don't know. You kind of want to say something, but then you don't. And it's kind of like that whole thing is happening in this episode, right? They're saying, look, for real, this is what I'm doing. And this is where this came from. So for him to make that line, what to your point, Big G, and to your point, Dane, for him to make that line, hey, go ahead, I launch you, you demon spawns. That was like, okay, I get it. And then the second piece of what Big G said, with Herb, that was super weird because we've not seen Herb act out like that ever before, right? We've seen him act out as far as the chainsaw and stuff, but we ain't never heard him say, okay, well, would you like for us to restart it? That whole bit was different, right? That whole bit was different. And it brought me back to this point. This is what, and then I'll let you finish on the breakdown, but it brought me back to this point. Why is it that these two characters were talking and whispering to one another about Monica Rambeau being inside of the house with Wanda by herself? I think that those two characters were doing that. And then for her to be like, would you like for me to reset something? Where did that come from?
Right.
Well, we've seen other people. Now, true enough, that interaction between them two is really interesting. But you saw the mailman. The mailman basically told the boys, "Oh, don't worry, your mom, she gonna take care of it." And then, of course, the way I think his name was Norm from the last episode when Vision, he's like, she's in my head. So to some extent, these people, and I don't want to get ahead of where we're going later on with stuff with Agnes. We know the situation, but these people are somehow aware that Wanda is driving this ship.
Or they perceive it as Wanda.
Yeah.
Well, and then after that, is where we really start seeing the viewpoint of Vision. Vision at this point, for lack of better words, is no longer under the spell of Wanda. He's got his own mind. He's got things made up, and he knows definitely that something is wrong, but he's trying to get a gist of the matter. We forget that Vision is a synthesoid android made out of vibranium with a supercomputer driven by the Mind Stone, at least the Vision that we know, right? And so he's trying to analyze what's going on inside of this area so then that way he can make a good decision to figure out, because his thing also is, I want to protect, I want to help. This is my family, and I don't really know what's going on, but I know something's wrong. So we catch Vision walking through different neighborhoods, and he goes and he walks into this neighborhood, and there's a lady that's stuck, and she's moving, and then all of a sudden a tear falls from her eyes, and it's like, wow, why she can't move forward, she can't move backwards, she can't do this, she can't do that, she's just really stuck, right? So she's moving, and then he's like, man, something's going on, Then all of a sudden, because in the marvelous fashion, we cut back to outside of the Hex. We're back outside, and we see Jimmy Woo, and we see Monica, and we see Darcy trying to get information on what's actually going on, right? And so in this process, we see them hack into the system and figure out, wait a minute, the leader of SWORD has a way of tracking decayed vibranium. So, inside of the Hex. And then Jimmy Woo makes the statement that, oh, wow, he can actually do a head count and see what's going on with it, right? And then we cut back inside of the Hex, right? So it's this back and forth monologue or monologue scenes, which goes real fast because we're in the hex, we're out the hex. We're in the hex, we're out the hex. We're in the hex, out the hex.
So let me ask that's a question that begs to, be answered. Vibranium is a substance that can't decay. How is it that vibranium is decaying, you guys?
Very interesting. Very interesting. I thought, from what we've been told as far as Marvel lore, is that vibranium is the strongest, most unbreakable substance that exists inside the MCU. So how is it decaying? How is it decaying?
So I would venture to say because it's decaying on Vision, right? It's decaying on him. So maybe because of the effect, you got to understand that the Infinity Stones were living objects. I would venture to say that the Infinity Stones may have in some ways been stronger than vibranium. So you think with them infused with Vision and who he was, and the fact that it made it when that thing got snatched out of him, it literally made him completely dormant in everything that he would be even made of. So that would be, I mean, look what it did to Tony Stark when he had all of them. It killed him.
Right.
So you can imagine it had some impact the same way on Vision when that one stone that was giving him complete life, when it got snatched from him, it literally created just a dormant situation across the board for him. So that's my prediction for it.
Yeah, definitely. And so I agree. I agree wholeheartedly that I think as we move forward, the sword is going to show more and more about what Vision actually is. I believe that. Right. So now going back to the monologue or the idea of the show. Now you see where they find out that not only can they track, not only can they see, not only that, but there's actual files that exist about who's what and how, right? And they make the decision that they're going to separate as a team because, and which is like my favorite part of the whole show, Monica pulls up her phone. She says, my way to get back in the hex is about an hour away. It's time to go. So are we going to get this big reveal of who this master engineer is that's able to like take over and show how they can get in and out of the bubble? Because from my standpoint, and I know for all of us, that has to be a main character. But we'll talk more about that later, right? And then you cut back into the bubble, and then you start seeing, I keep saying the bubble, the hex. You start seeing the dialogue between Wanda and Pietro. And it's like Pietro's questioning her, but then Wanda's questioning Pietro. Like, how'd you lose your accent? How do you know about this? Where did you come from? Your recollection of this is this way. My recollection is this that way. So it's like an antagonistic standpoint, but it's almost like building a relationship and trying to create a level or a line of trust. Because the conversation is so broad, it goes from talking about the kids to where he even makes a reference and say, look, I'm not your brother. I'm not them other people. He doesn't say, oh, I'm not your husband. But he doesn't say who I am. He's just saying you can trust me. And so when he says that, there's a level of guard that's let down that she actually says, well, I don't know how I got there. I don't know A, B, C, and D, right? But this is what happens, right? So we go through those scenes, and then all of a sudden we get a commercial break, right? So which one of y'all,
Let's not forget about what happened before the commercial.
Yeah, or the dead man. And check this out. That Vision or dead man doesn't even necessarily line up with the dead man of the Quicksilver that we saw in Avengers Age of Ultron. The bullet holes were different. The way that the face look was different. It's just like Monica subconsciously understands that he's dead, but it's like her viewpoint of it versus actually recalling or recanting actually what happened and went on in Age of Ultron. So that was like real interesting. And then, like I said, wow, then boom, we go back. We go to that cut scene. And Wanda, like I said, I don't know if she's driving this. I don't know if she's the one. I just don't know. You know, as of this point, what do y'all think?
It's hard for me to really pinpoint it. I just think that he is a one thing that I think, the reason why I think is definitely him, he's not an imposter, is because we identified him in the intro. When they had the little intro, they said Pietro Maximoff starring as himself.
Mm.
So I think that was a clue. I think that, like I said, I just really feel that this dude is from another, because he's coming, everything he's telling her is from his point of view, from another reality.
Mm.
She's telling her point of view from her reality, and that's why they're clashing. So I really don't not trust him. I just think he's just like, they're not on the same page, kind of like her and Vision. But you know, because I don't have any reason to think there's any ulterior motives behind him. You know.
Yeah.
I mean, we haven't seen anything. I think he definitely seems to care for his nephews. He's very playful with them. So I haven't seen anything sinister about him as of yet.
The question is, are those his nephews? You know, and we're going to get into that conversation of whether or not that's after his nephews, because he shows, and I'm going to reference all the way back to the beginning, where he said, when he had the conversation with Vision, he said, well, you know, I possess that XY chromosome and I can be a father figure to these people, you know, and it's like, man, are they part of him? Are they part of, or is he like, you know, who we think this is? Is this the Mephisto character? And these are parts of him. And that's why he wants to spend so much time with him, so he can develop them. And because if you notice, their powers don't manifest until he starts interacting with them.
True.
Right. And the more he interacts with them, the more their powers manifest. So that's like, an unknown mystery. And I think by the end of the show, we're definitely going to know which way it's going.
Right. Definitely. Which leads us to the next part. Big G, you were about to get into it.
The commercial.
The commercial.
Man, I have a theory about the commercials, but we're talking about a recap right now. But the commercial was a definite throwback to, one of my favorite snacks as a kid was Go-Gurt, but this time it's called Yo Magic, and you got a kid that's isolated on an island with a crab and a tree. And he's talking about, I'm so hungry, I could just eat anything. And then here's this shark that shows up on a surfboard with some glasses that says, hey, you shouldn't starve. You shouldn't be hungry. All you need is this Yo Magic, and it'll sustain you. You'll feel better and great about your situation. And the little boy says, oh, please, can I have some? And the shark says, sure, and throws him some. So you see this claymation kid sit and pull and try to open up a yogurt, and he can't open it. He can't open it. He can't open it. He can't open it. And it's like the sun goes down, the sun comes up, the sun goes down. And it's almost like a remnant to show you how time moves, maybe within the commercial or within the TV land. But by the end of the commercial, the kid decays all the way from living to where he's like a skull, just sitting there, or like a skeleton just sitting there. And so much time has passed that he dies. And at the end of the commercial, they say, Yo Magic, that's how you'll survive. You have to eat or feed off the magic if you want to survive, because there's no other way to be able to survive. So it was like, man, why are they keep giving us these hints or these things in these commercials that just lead us back to all kind of different things? That's my perspective. But what do you guys think about it?
I think, I thought it was really interesting that it's Yo Magic, and they're talking about we're feeding off of Yo Magic, right? So honestly, it's a great play. It's a great twist. And it's just saying it's one of those things where I'm saying to you again, they're saying, hey, we're really actually doing this. I want you guys to understand this is really what we're doing, right? And for the average everyday watcher and viewer, they're showing it. They're showing, hey, they're pushing, just like this is what I believe, and we'll get into it more. It's funny how Pietro pushed Wanda, but it's also funny how in the next segment, you're going to see how Vision was being pushed, right? So there were different things happening, and all of it, the sum total of it is for Wanda to use more magic.
Mm-hmm.
So the commercial kind of fell right into the whole scheme of this episode. Yo, magic. You know what I'm saying? Dane, what you think?
So I think you see a twofold thing going. I've seen several people say this, and I kind of agree with it. So number one, the first thing you see in that commercial is kind of a nod to her getting her powers from Hydra. You know, them using the mind song on her, both her and Pietro, of course, but how they used her. They basically used her to get the intended purpose of what they wanted. Nodding to the future of where we're headed, I think is almost going to be the exact same things. There's a puppet master controlling the whole realm of what's going on using her abilities. And so I think it's a nod to her past, but also kind of indicative of what I think eventually are going to see in her future. But yeah, definitely Marvel must have a brother man on the set for using that yo magic.
Right. There's something going on that we just really can't see, but that's the Marvel way. You know, the great thing about Marvel and MCU is that they always find a way to pull everybody in, you know, and get some type of level of enjoyment and or satisfaction, and like tied to the storylines and the plots, you know, which is, you know, a great thing. All right. So now going back to like the finale of the show per se, or the last act. The last act is more or less Vision trying to figure out what's happening or what's going on, right? And so now he's combed. Now, and I want you guys to remember, from what we've been told and know, the hex is 5 miles in diameter, right? So he's covered 5 miles by the time the sun went up to the sun going down. He's went in different neighborhoods. He's went in cul-de-sacs. He's went, you know, and he was in his last, like, final straw was within that cul-de-sac, and the people weren't moving at all, you know. And he's like, wait a minute, something is happening. Something is going on. Because he's talking to him like, are those your children? Who are those people? And they're not reacting and or acting, right? So it's almost like a monitor or a call back to Wanda saying, do you really believe that I can, in one of the prior episodes, would you really believe I can control everything that's going on in here? Then you got to be kidding me, you know? So then we see Vision for the first time manipulate everything he's got, which in all actuality is a power that he possessed, but we have not seen this since Avengers Infinity War, where he actually able to change his appearance and everything, right? So he goes into the Vision that we know from the MCU, from the comic book to the MCU Vision, right? And he shoots up in the air, and he's flying like how he can, and he's looking and he's surveying, just like Vision does. He surveys the situation to figure out what's going to be the best way to solve it. He notices a vehicle that's right on the edge or the end of Ellis Street, which is supposed to be the end of the neighborhoods, right? And so he flies down, and here's a car, right? And within this car, oh wow, here's Agnes sitting there, and it's almost like, is she under a spell? Is she frozen, like how you would freeze talking through internet? Some kind of way she's just stuck, right? And so she's talking, and he starts to have this dialogue and this conversation with her. Within the context of the dialogue, she says, well, where's the heart of the city? Where's this, that, and this? And, he's like, wait a minute, you don't know you grew up in this city. You grew up in this place. How do you not know what's going on, right? And then so he's like, okay, look, in order for me probably to get what I need to get, it's going to be better for me to just touch her, which is a power that Vision has never had before, right? We've seen Vision be able to do all kind of other stuff, but until the WandaVision show, we've never seen Vision have the ability to touch people and more or less change with their ionic being, right? It messes with their ability to be caught and not be caught, right? Which I think is an Easter egg within an Easter egg, and it's something that we'll talk about later, right? And so once Vision pulls her out, you know, the dialogue or the character for her goes from scared to shocked to angry to at the end, she has like a Wizard of Oz, Wicked Witch of the West, sinister laugh. Like, we're all gonna, you know, this is all bad and we're all gonna die and everybody's dead and all. And she's laughing at Vision, you know. And Vision's like, wait, I can't take this. I can't take this. And pushes her back in. And she literally goes back to that character, back to the person that she was portraying and says, have a happy Halloween. U-turns it, heads right back into the hex. You know, to me, that was like one of the telltale parts of the show. You know, like you really got to see now maybe a viewpoint or a glimpse of what's going on. Fellas, what do y'all think about that?
I mean, it was the most sinister part of the night for me, right? Because just me seeing through muddy water, spotting dry land, fellas, she didn't do a good job of selling it for me. I knew you were there because you wanted to be, right? And you were there for a purpose. You sat there long enough so that Vision could see you, right? And then after that, you just went on this great acting spree. Right? I mean, you went on this great act. It's clear that Wanda's magic don't work on you. So how's Vision's touching working on you? I don't get it. Like,
right.
You know, and then the laugh. The laugh was the thing that did it for me. I almost had to turn the volume down. It was just, I was like, man, this is creepy. Like, this is really creepy. I don't really like the way that this is sounding right now. Dame, you know, I mean, how did you feel about it?
I don't know where she was going. I mean, that's what I would like to know is where was she headed in that car? Because obviously it seemed like the people that were on the outskirts, they weren't impacted by Wanda's power. It seemed that's the way it seemed. That's why they almost like they were glitching. You know what I'm saying? And it seemed like, why would she go out and get in that same position for whatever reason? That was the weird part. But definitely the laugh part was interesting because that was the real her.
Yeah.
When Vision touched the people like he did Norm came to himself. So when he touched her, she went into that being fearful, but then she went into that laugh and he had to touch her again and she stopped laughing. So what the heck was she laughing about? That was
right.
And like Sean said, it was straight up like a witch from Wizard of Oz. It was she was laughing crazy, man. So that's the part that I'm just like, I don't know what is up with Agnes. She is the one character that is almost like the linchpin of this thing that she's always from episode 1 to here. She has been the one that's been consistently that we know is something not altogether right with her. And it builds every episode. So
right.
Yeah.
It's just and here's the deal. So right after that, the interesting interaction to me at this point was Jimmy Woo and Darcy and Monica are still in this room, and Darcy tells Monica, "Hey, you've been changed on a molecular level. You really can't go back into the hex again, right?" And so they leave Darcy there because Darcy's like, "Hey, I'm not finished cracking the firewall here, and let me go ahead and finish cracking this firewall so that I could get all of his secrets, because I know that at this point the director is hiding something, right?" So you have her here at the computer, and while she's here at the computer, she starts to catch a couple of things. Now, Dane pointed out some things, and definitely, Dame, I want you to expand. And then, Big G, tell us what this is. But Dane, tell us what what we're seeing right now.
So these were files that Darcy had tapped into. I can't think of his name. The director. She tapped into his personal files with I guess with everything that's going on. But this one particular file came up and is very, very important. As you can see there, it's entitled Cataract. And if you think about it, what does a cataract do? A cataract impairs or affects your vision. So I think that in light of what we've all been talking about with vision, and we saw you know, kind of briefly when they showed the monitor and they had Vision's body all over the place. So clearly there's a distinct interest in reprogramming or repurposing Vision. That's what they're interested in. That's what Sword is in. They maybe care about Wanda, but they really are after whatever Vision, whatever their purpose was for him when she went and broke his body out of there. Because obviously you're trying to impact what the Vision is with the cataract, the change purpose it. So that was not by accident, the accident that we saw that file name.
Oh, I definitely agree. I mean, I think when it's all said and done, when we find out what cataract is, what cataract means, it's something way bigger. And I'm a firm believer that the villain or the director is a villain that we just can't see. And I believe there's something huge going on with him as being named the director of Sword. You know, there's no doubt that there's something that's big going on with him. You know, but now once they move from the part where you see Darcy and Monica and Jimmy break up, you know, as far as a team, you know, then all of a sudden you notice that, hey, Vision is walking towards the edge of the hex. You know, matter of fact, he now understands and knows that there's something that's separating the outside world to their world. You know, and I don't know if he necessarily sees it, but he sure walks up on it. You know, and then once he walks up on it and touches it, you know, his thing is busting through it. You know, and that's that's the next scene that we see. You know, we see Vision busting through it, and then there's a whole thing that goes on with that. You know, you see little by little parts of him get pulled back into it, but then you see also parts of him that remain out of it. And the one interesting part is we never get an up-close viewpoint to see the actual stone that's within his head get pulled back in. We see parts of the cape, parts of the skin. We see his fingers disintegrate. We see parts of his face. And we even see like up underneath his skin where he's like that yellowish color, almost the color of the stone up underneath it. But then when he falls to the ground, he's just laying there and you don't continue to see parts of him get sucked back in just from those initial parts. So that's almost got me wondering, did they take something and add to Vision to make Vision? Did they take another person? Did they take something? Because it seemed like if he was just part of what's going on in the hex, all of them would have went in. But it didn't go down like that. It was the parts that she, almost like that Wanda created to make him come whole, got pulled back in, and the parts that was him remained. You know, that was like real interesting to me, you know. And then we have the climactic end. You know, the climactic end is, to this point, we've seen the one twin, Tommy, use his powers, you know, and his powers is very similar to his uncle's. You know, from the comic book realm, he's now what you consider speed, you know. But then for the first time, you see the other twin use his powers, and he literally freezes his brother. He stops him from being able to run fast or move fast, right? And he's like, hold it. And then he has this telekinesis powers, but then all of a sudden his telepathy powers show up. And he hears his father, you know, yelling out, crying like he's hurting and something's wrong and all whatever else. And what's interesting is he heard it and Wanda didn't. Mm-hmm. You know, that's like real interesting. How come Wanda's supposed to be this super telepath? She would have picked up a Vision and they're supposed to be connected. She would have picked up on Vision being hurt right away. Nothing. She was caught up with her conversation and her dealings with her brother. Right. And it was like she was completely separated from the Vision, you know. Exactly. And so the son's like, wait a minute, Dad's hurt. Wait, Mom, wait. And they run, you know, together, the two boys. And like, Mom, something's wrong with Dad. I know what's going on. Something, he's hurting. And she looks at him like, okay. And then here's Pietro, which throws me. Pietro makes a little sinister comment. Well, it's obvious you can't kill your dead brother twice, which in turn, Wanda literally hauls him out We don't know. Yeah. You can't kill your dead husband twice. All we know is we seen him get knocked away. Not at the same pace that Monica got knocked away, where she got knocked all the way out of the hex. But we see him get hauled out by her hex magic, knocked up and literally into a graveyard, because there's tombstones and everything. And is this saying, is she knocking him back to the dead where he came from? It's a lot of little things, the little nuances that are part of that segment of series. So in turn, Monica's like, wait a minute. And in open and broad daylight around hundreds of people, boom, hex magic full blown. She stops time. She stops time, and then we get a cut shot to her eyes, and her eyes turn full blown red. And then from there, all of a sudden, we see Wanda start to push out the hex, and the hex grows. Because keep in mind, on the other side of the hex, the sword agents and all of them are standing there, and they're like, wait a minute, what in the world is going on? And this thing starts growing, and it's growing, and it's pushing out, and it's becoming larger. You get a cut shot of Jimmy Woo, and Monica driving away, and she's like, wait a minute, do you notice what's going on? And Jimmy Woo's like, hit it, and they pull off and drive away, because remember, they're going to go meet the engineer, right? And then you cut back and you see the hex push out far enough to where it takes Vision and it makes him all the way back to the vision of what was before he stepped out of it. And then it starts taking the different members of Sword, right? And it's setting up almost like what the next episode is. It's a whole bunch of clowns, more or less. They become clowns and it's a circus tent, and it's all kind of whatever. And then you see Darcy like, oh my God, because she's handcuffed to the front of a car. She's like, oh my God, oh my God. And when she's sucked in through the hex, you don't see her, right? Unlike the other agents of Sword, they instantly turn into clowns and instantly turn into tents, and one of the cars turns into this big top thing, and then parts of the other cars turns to a used lot.
Helicopter turned into a hot air balloon.
Right. It's like everything changes except Darcy. Darcy doesn't change. She just disappears.
Hey, Big G, I think that's because they saying to be continued next week. We're going to see what happened to her. They didn't want to spoil it for us. Right.
Oh, yeah. That's definitely to get us as viewers to be like, what happened to Darcy? Because we're locked into her as a character, And then, like I said, we come to this climactic end, and she's pushed everything out, right? And she pops out of the hex. They do a zoom in close up of her face, of Wanda's face, and she opens up her eyes, and her eyes turn from red back to regular. And then we go to a commercial break, and it says, "Please stand by." So it's almost like, Wanda, are you actually running the show? Or is there a director that's behind the scenes that's doing cut scenes that's saying, hey, look, something done changed. We having technical difficulties. There's a time to reboot something. There's a time to redo something, because maybe this is something that you wasn't supposed to see.
Well, if I can add, that's how every show ends. That little thing that comes on at the end, that's how the show ends. So it just ended at that point. But I definitely, one thing that I would say is what she was doing. Now, go back to what Monica said when Monica got kicked out, kind of referencing what you just said, Big G, about Wanda being in control. When Monica got kicked out, she said, it's all Wanda. It's all Wanda. So I'm like, how much of that is really true? It's just, I'm telling you. And notice, once again, the thing that she told Pietro is, if y'all notice, is very similar to what she told Vision about, I was really lonely, and the next thing I was in this world.
Right.
My wife actually had a really good hypothesis, and she said maybe Wanda's subconscious is so powerful that it's kind of detached from her reality, that in her subconscious this world was created. I mean, so
listen to the name of the show. It's
right.
WandaVision, not we're thinking Wanda and Vision, but maybe it's just Wanda's vision, right?
Right.
You know, and there is someone there's obviously somebody else I mean, the Yo Magic commercial kind of, like I said, it just in your face. This is what this is. You know, definitely somebody else is running the show. And then for her to ask her, hey, do we need to redo something? You know, that's letting me know that somebody else is pulling some strings, but who, we don't know, right?
Right. Right. I know that like I said, you know, the theory of this, and that I'm leaning more and more and more into believing, is this is a full blown movie version of the House of M in the comic books. This is Wanda Maximoff literally resetting and rechanging reality based on her grief and based on her trauma. You know, now of course they have to do throwbacks through the MCU and tie in the Stones and other parts of the prior written, what we call quote unquote canon of the MCU. But however, I think this is the closest adaptation that you're going to get to the House of M. The House of M is, for those that are comic book fans or comic book heads like myself, the House of M is more or less Marvel's way of resetting or the Marvel universe. Wanda Maximoff goes in and changes everything, right? And by her changing everything, we get a new view or a new spin on what the MCU actually is. That's my take. That's my view.
Yeah,
what do y'all think?
I agree. And also, if you look at the one comic with Vision where he had a family, it's kind of a marriage of the House of M in that comic too. But yeah, man, I mean, dude, they are doing such an excellent job of world building. I think that they're just setting the stage for so many things that are going to be coming, not just for this series, but for the next entire phase. We've said this before on the show, but they are definitely really laying a construct for where we're going. And I'm noticing something as I'm looking at the social media posts that people talked about the show. In the beginning, a lot of people were, you know, very, very kind of confused about everything, but people's interest seemed to be really piqued. And that's what we continue to tell you. You got to let the story ride out because they're going somewhere with it. And they're doing an excellent job.
Yeah, I think you got to let the story unfold, and it's happening. And, you know, definitely I'm excited for, you know, really, I mean, if you think about it, I really want them to just go and let out the whole series go. Just let it go. Let us get it, you know, let us get it. Let us talk about it. But hey, you know, definitely got another week show coming ahead of us. And we're so excited about that. But hit us up. Let us know what you think about our opinions, our takes on what you've seen thus far in the first 6 episodes. I agree with Dane 110%. It's world building. That's what we're doing. That's what's happening right here. You have to continue to be patient. It's a new world. It's new experiences. What we've seen beyond the last part of Endgame, all of those things. You know, we're definitely seeing a whole new world. We're seeing a whole new world. But you guys, man, please, just like I said, reach out to us. You can catch us here, of course, on YouTube. You can see us on our social media sites. You can catch up with us, tag us, talk to us. What's your thoughts on WandaVision? What are your thoughts that you have and that you're seeing take fruition and come to pass throughout all these episodes? And what do you see to come? Now, one last thing for me. I could not allow Big G's comment to go unnoticed and untalked about. We did not see Darcy immediately turn into a clown into the last episode. And why is it that and we know Kevin Feige doesn't waste anything. Why is it that we didn't see her turn into a clown? I don't know. But I did find this.
Oh,
Actually, we're in the 2000s now, right? So guess what exists? You know, Dane pointed out, Malcolm in the Middle, that's 2000. We're in the 2000s. Something that exists in the 2000s are cell phones. And
Right.
this picture is a screenshot from our next episode that's coming. You see from the picture, hey, Darcy hadn't changed. Reason for that. And I think inherently, just like what Monica's been saying, I don't think that Wanda's trying to be a bad person.
No.
I just think that Wanda's caught up in her own vision. Like your wife said, Dang, you know, Tara, she tells some good stuff. I really believe that this is her vision, but somebody else is orchestrating it to make her magic grow so they can feed from it. Could that be Nightmare? Could that be Mephisto? Who are we gonna see coming? I don't know. But y'all tune in.
Is she gonna do like Vision? She gonna do like Vision told her to be good. Is she gonna be good? Is the question.
Yeah.
We don't know. But make sure you guys tune in, hit the like and subscribe button. This is Marvelous Talk. It's your boy Mod.
D is out.
Big G, holla.
We holla.